Shana Tova, everybody.
Shana Tova.
So who's hungry yet? Anyone? No? Oh, someone in the back.
Please, no.
Sorry to hear that. So I can make that joke now, but we're only a few hours in. I promise I won't make it tomorrow. I promise.
Fair.
Okay, great. Several centuries ago in Europe, Rabbi Chaim and Rabbi Eliezer celebrated a very special occasion. Their children got married to each other. After the wedding, Chaim told Eliezer, "Now that we're related, I can finally tell you what's eating at my heart. My hair has already gone white, and I don't believe I have worked hard enough to atone for my sins." How did Eliezer respond? I'll tell you that in just a moment. Starting tonight, we fast and deprive ourselves in the hope that we don't become like Rabbi Chaim. You probably know already that our fasting, for those of us who can and those of us who choose to do so, is a vehicle in order to better focus on our atonement. Judah Halevi, a Jewish philosopher from Spain, teaches that abandoning natural and physical functions, such as eating and drinking, allow us to completely focus on our spiritual goals for the day. Our hunger and discomfort help us better recognize the brokenness and imperfections in ourselves, leading to self-reflection, forgiveness of ourselves and others, and cleansing our souls for a new year. This is an undeniably important part of Yom Kippur, but Rabbi Eliezer did not have advice for Chaim about how to fast longer or confess stronger or atone better. "Oh, my friend," he replied, "why don't you forget about yourself for a minute and focus on the world?" This quippy reply might seem to some sarcastic, maybe even cruel, but Rabbi Eliezer's advice is important, not just for Rabbi Chaim, but also for us tonight. We are important, and atoning for our sins is important. But our fasting and our atonement cannot end with ourselves. On Yom Kippur morning, we'll read our Haftorah portion from the prophet Isaiah. In Isaiah's sermon, the Israelite people complained to God, "When we starved and fasted, why didn't you listen to us?" And God responds, "Because on your fast day, you see to your business and oppress all your laborers, because you fast in strife and contention, and you strike with a wicked fist. Your fasting today is not worthy to make your voice heard on high." The prophet Isaiah chastises the people who, while technically fasting, expect God to listen to their requests while they only go through the motions in their religious observance. Isaiah asks us through the centuries, and tomorrow morning especially when our hunger has peaked a little more, are we simply going through the motions? What will our fast mean to us after we've broken it in the evening? God, through the words of Isaiah, proclaims, "Is this the fast I desire, a day for people to starve their bodies? No, this is the fast I desire, to unlock the chains of wickedness, to let the oppressed go free, to break off every yoke. It is to share your bread with the hungry, to take the wretched poor into your home, when you see the naked to clothe them, and not to ignore your own kin." God wants us to shift our discomfort within ourselves to the greater discomfort of seeing another suffering. The discomfort that we must hold ourselves accountable for the brokenness in the world. This is not just the words of a single prophet or rabbi, but the very core of our tradition, and I mean that literally. The very center of the Torah is the verse, "Love your neighbor as yourself." And the commandment repeated the most in the Torah, 36 times to be exact, is not about religious observance or even belief in God. The commandment is to not oppress the stranger. Sometimes the stranger is mentioned along with the poor, other times with the widow and the orphan. But the law goes beyond this. The stranger is often explicitly given the same rights as native Israelites. And even further than that, the stranger must be loved. As it says in Leviticus, "Love the stranger as yourself, for you know the soul of the stranger, as you were once strangers in the land of Egypt. So who is the stranger? It can have several meanings. A stranger can simply be someone you don't know or someone new in the community. And this may remind us of the stranger danger videos we were shown or maybe told about when we were younger. Which, by the way, sets a certain kind of precedent in our society for how we view strangers in the first place. This contrasts with our tradition. We often tell the story of Abraham and Sarah welcoming 3 strangers who they later learned to be divine messengers into their home. And it's a foundation for one of our values, Hachnasat Orchim, being welcoming to others. In ancient times, the stranger was understood not as someone who was unknown, but as a resident who lived in the Israelite community, but who was not an Israelite themselves, that is, born of one of the 12 tribes. We see this in our tradition with the story of Ruth. Ruth is a Moabite and marries into an Israelite family. Even though she tells her mother-in-law Naomi, "Your people will be my people and your God, my God," she is still called a Moabite and a foreigner. Regardless, she becomes the great-grandmother of King David. She is one of 2 women to have their own books in the Bible, and her speech to Naomi became the foundation for conversion to Judaism. But let us also remember that in this ancient time where tribal affiliation was so important, being accepted in a community could mean the difference between life and death. A person who chose to live among the Israelites but was not Israelite could have been seen as a second-class citizen. But as Rabbi Jonathan Sachs teaches, these laws to not oppress the stranger, to give them equal rights, and even to love them, this is a biblical understanding, perhaps the earliest understanding, of minority rights. Tomorrow morning's Torah portion is from Nitzavim, when we all stand and accept the covenant from God. We read, "You shall stand this day, all of you, before the eternal your God, your elders, your officials, all of the men, the women, the children, even the stranger within your camp, to enter into the covenant of Adonai your God on this day." Rabbi Chaim ben Attar reminds us that even though we have a special covenant with God, that does not make us superior to the stranger or anyone who's different from us. We're not superior, we're equals. Even the stranger has its own place in the covenant. From a larger context in the ancient world, this stance towards the stranger is quite remarkable. Rabbi Sachs reminds us that the pages of history are stained with much blood spilled in the name of racial or ethnic conflict. What does all this mean for us today? We live in a very different world, and yet that world is still very, very broken. This year has felt like a year of protest, a year of marches. There have been marches of millions across the nation for women's rights, for equality, for pride, for racial justice, for the validity of science. And in August, there was a march for hate. For many of us, it was a day that filled us with terror and anxiety. But for many, it was a demonstration of the oppression they have lived with and experienced their entire lives. Now, we all know that at our core, we're the same. We are all one species. In Genesis 1, famously, God creates humanity in God's own image. So it stands to reason from our tradition that each person is God. If only we could treat each other that way. But the Torah reminds us 36 times, the way perhaps a parent or a teacher may have to remind a child of the same thing over and over and over again, because we're prone to forgetting it. We divide ourselves into us and them. And in today's society, it's very easy to cut off someone in your car, send a nasty Facebook message, and forget that there is a human being on the other side of that interaction. Even though we're more aware of the goings-on in the world than ever before, it can be very easy to dismiss another's plight or oppression when we aren't seeing it face to face. Asia Kate Dillon is a trans, non-gender binary identifying actor who has received much recognition not only for their very incredible role in Orange is the New Black, but also for being the first to play a non-gender binary identifying character on a major television show, Billions. So a person who identifies as non-binary means that they experience their gender identity outside of being either a man or a woman. Asia, instead of using she or her pronouns, uses singular they or them pronouns. In Asia's speech accepting this year's Human Rights Campaign's Visibility Award, they said these words: "No one is free until we all are free. Until the most marginalized among us, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, especially trans, intersex, and genderqueer folks, are held up as essential assets to the survival of us all, no one is free. When we work to make the world safer for others, we are ultimately making it safer for ourselves." And this is why we fast. This is what Isaiah wants us to remember on the holiest day of our calendar, and it's the same thing we remember every Passover. We are not free yet because not everyone is free. We deprive ourselves today as a reminder that all around the world people are deprived, and it is our responsibility to be a part of that healing. In the words of Rabbi Tarfon, it is not your responsibility to complete the work, but you are not free to desist from it. So where do we go from here? The first part is awareness. As we begin our fast tonight, I encourage each of us to ask in our discomfort, who is the stranger in our midst? When we say, Al chet shechatanu lefanecha, for the sins we committed before you, may we also add, for the sins we committed when we knowingly or unknowingly oppressed others with our words, our speech, or our actions. For the sins we committed when we knowingly or unknowingly oppressed others with our inaction, our silence, or our privilege. For the sins we committed when we did not see someone else's oppression as our own, when we failed to see the humanity in another. It's a long road, and it's uncomfortable, and it's going to be full of mistakes. Even rabbinical students and rabbis can give in to turning a blind eye. Even though I share these words with you tonight, please don't think that it comes from a place of superiority or perfection. Quite the contrary. I may have reached out this past year, but I could have done more. I may have attended some peaceful protests advocating justice and equality, but there were times where I simply hit share on Facebook and did not consider how I could have followed up with action. I have volunteered, but I also chose at times to stay within my comfort zone, such as volunteering at a dog shelter, instead of reaching out to a human person in need. Even when I was writing the sermon, I unthinkingly misgendered Asia using she, her pronouns, and it wasn't until I read it again that I realized my mistake. So the first part is awareness, and the second part is action. I'm sure many of us have been involved in some sort of social justice, social action, volunteering in some way over the past year, as we read in our acts of healing and repair. And now in the discomfort of our fast, we can challenge ourselves to do more in 5778. Hopefully these words have stirred something in you and in myself tonight. Rabbi Leo Beck writes, "It is easy to revel enthusiastically in one's love of another, but it is more difficult to do good to someone solely because they are a human being. When we are approached by a person demanding their right, we cannot replace ethical action by mere vague goodwill." The fast of social justice compels us to reach out, sometimes with a check or a donation, if that's what's needed most, such as helping those in such desperate need in Puerto Rico and in the Caribbean right now. But also to reach out with our hands, to share our bread with the hungry, to take the poor into our homes, as Isaiah said, to do what we can to have an incredibly uncomfortable gesture, that is to face that person's suffering. The fast of social justice reminds us that in the moment of reaching out, even if we're uncomfortable, it's not about us. The fast of social justice comes with the knowledge that the steps might be small and the hours might be long, but they contribute to a greater whole. And we will likely not be satiated with praise, recognition, or fanfare. The fast of social justice means that our pride might need to take a back seat, and we might need to ask the oppressed, how can we help? And be prepared for whatever those answers might be. The fast of social justice reminds us that just as with a fast, we cannot live forever on a diet of air, oppression and marginalization too often becomes a matter of life and death. I'm new to Columbus, and so for the last couple of months, I have been a stranger in a strange land. And coming from Los Angeles, it is indeed a strange land. Not too strange, but, you know. But regardless, I have been welcomed and embraced by each of you, whether it be here at the temple or in coffee shops or even in your homes. You've helped me feel so welcome and accepted, and for that, I'm very grateful. Thank you. Over the last couple of months, I've gotten to know you better as a community, and I can say for certain that Temple Beth Shalom is a place of inclusion and acceptance. It's a safe space for everyone, and that it takes fierce pride in being welcoming towards those who are new to its community. Moreover, this community is deeply concerned with healing the world. Tonight and tomorrow, we're going to be bringing in canned food for the needy. In a little bit, tomorrow, we're going to be sharing a new project to help families in the Caribbean who have lost everything in the recent hurricanes. We teach about tzedakah and justice to our children in the religious school, and we even have a school-wide mitzvah day in the spring. Our congregation is also a member of the interfaith organization BREAD, which stands for Building Responsibility, Equality, and Dignity. It's an organization comprised of many congregations and churches uniting for one shared commitment of social justice. If you're interested in being involved, we would love for you to join us Sunday, October 15th at 9:30 at JCC New Albany. Perhaps you'll already be heading there for religious school. And there will also be an annual assembly in November to vote on the next community issue that BREAD will be focusing on in the upcoming year. As I fast and as I enter my first full year as a rabbi, I want to learn how to reach out to those who might be strangers here in Columbus. I want to follow my own words with action. I would love to hear from you about what you are passionate about, what issues are close to your heart, what issues are most prevalent here, and how I can help to get involved. And if there is an issue or a project that you're interested in, but you aren't sure how to help or where to start, let's work together, reach out, and start a dialogue. Asia said, "No one is free until we all are free. Until the most marginalized among us are held up as essential assets to the survival of us all, no one is free. When we work to make the world safer for others, we are ultimately making it safer for ourselves." This year, may we take to heart the great Irish saying, "A stranger is just a friend you haven't met yet." This year, may each of us love the stranger as ourselves. May our feelings of goodwill be translated into action. Isaiah says that if we partake in this great humbling work of social justice, if you give yourself to the hungry and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, then your light shall shine in the darkness, and your night become bright as noon, and the Eternal One will walk before you. As Jews, we are called a light unto the nations. This year, let us be that light. Shana Tova.